For part two of this week in our discussion about data and what statistics really is all about, we're going to talk about this important distinction between a sample of data and a population of data. So let's go back to some of these research questions that you might encounter. These are questions that people often ask in the social sciences and humanities. So what is the average number of words spoken daily among 10-year-old school children in New York City? If you're a linguist, you might ask this kind of question. Another research question you might ask would be, do citizens of the United States approve or disapprove of legalizing marijuana use? Another question that you might ask is, if you're interested in public health or if you're a social psychologist, you might ask about meditation. You might say, does meditating for 15 minutes each day improve happiness among college students in Beijing? These are the kinds of research questions that people in the social sciences and humanities ask. These are real questions. But for each of these questions, there's an implicit population. So let's think about what a population is. A population is simply the entire collection of cases or observational units about which we desire information. So each of these questions, there's a target population. In general, for population, you might talk about, if you're talking about the percentage of Buddhists in Japan, the population implied is the population of all people in Japan. So let's look at our research questions that we posed and think about what the population might be. So when we ask what is the average number of words spoken daily among 10-year-old school children in New York City, if you're a linguist and you're asking that question, your implicit, your target population is all 10-year-old children who attend school in New York City. There's that target population suggested by the research question. For the next research question, suppose you're a sociologist or a political scientist and you want to know about legalizing marijuana use and what people in the United States think about approving or disapproving such a policy. The target population here is all citizens of the United States, all people who live in the United States. For the third research question, in which we're talking about meditation, the target population implied is all college students in Beijing. These research questions, they imply a target population. So if you want to actually collect data on the entire population, that is called conducting a census. Censuses have a long history. They've existed for centuries and centuries. And they existed for really the purposes of empire building. A state or an empire, they would collect information on all of their citizens for collecting money, for taxing them, for trying to encourage population reproduction, because a reproducing population, a growing population, usually, historically, has led to a stronger, larger empire. Also, these states and empires, they collected a census in order to recruit able-bodied men for war and battle. So the idea of collecting data on an entire population is known as a census, and it's existed for a very long time. Here's an example that we will use in this course. It's a census of Turin, Italy in 1705. The French were attacking Turin, and in part to recruit people for war, in particular men, city officials, they surveyed all inhabitants of Turin, Italy. So when you conduct a census, you collect data on all cases or all people in this case. The variables included name, age, gender, birthplace, and the weapons they kept in the household. Here is the data set for the 1705 census of Turin, Italy. The rows are residents of Turin, Italy. So we have quite a few rows here. I've truncated the output so we could show at least part of it. And then the columns, they are characteristics of the residents. So what you see here is we have last name, first name, age, and gender of the respondent. There are a few problems with the census. It's often very difficult to conduct, and it's expensive because you have to collect data on everybody. Especially hard to reach groups such as, for example, in the United States, undocumented workers or homeless people. It can further increase the cost. As well, there are some ethical concerns with the census because when you actually collect data on people, you're forcing everybody to participate in a society. So there may be some ethical dilemmas in terms of violating one's privacy. Suppose somebody doesn't want to actually be a participant in a census. Well, then you can't actually conduct a census if you actually can't collect data on everybody. This is why even in the United States, a very rich country overall, they only conduct a census once every 10 years because a census is expensive. Collecting data on everybody or all cases, it can cost a lot and it's difficult. One solution, an alternative to conducting a census, is to collect a sample of a population. So here we have a population and we have a sample. And what we're doing is we're collecting some subset of that population. We take samples all the time. This is not just something that statisticians do. Suppose you're at a giant buffet with hundreds of different entrees. Most people will try out some subset of the entrees before you make a conclusion about what to eat. So you might take a steak, you might take a bit of chicken, you might take some green beans. Just some sample of the buffet, and then out of that sample, you say, oh, I really like the green beans, I'm just going to have that for the rest of my meal. Again, you sample all the time. When you listen to music, you might listen to a few stations on the radio, and then you really focus on one station to really listen to. Or when making decisions, you might ask a few people, and then you make a decision yourself. Or when buying things. The underlying emphasis here is that sampling, it's pretty natural to take a sample of cases and then to use that sample of cases to say something about a larger set of cases.